Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I'm going to be talking in a bit of a mishmash fashion, but still directed under one kind of tenet, and that is, when in doubt, public school arc, so to speak. And this one is more anime-focused, but it can apply to JRPGs sometimes as well, like in Suikoden. But that one was more, there's a person in a place that is going to get like captured or kidnapped or arrested, and they're in hiding, so we have to infiltrate the school and do the thing and do the whatever. When I mentioned this public school arc idea, I don't mean shows that start, like their whole entire concept is it, because with a lot of the anime and JRPG stuff, a lot of the stuff is shorthand, because a lot of shows either start in school, use school as a framing device, a lot of stuff like that. You've seen anything from caste system things like Kakegurui and Classroom of the Elite, things I don't think I've reviewed yet, but I know I will at some point. You know, just having it as a structure for any goddamn thing you can think of, any concept, backdrop, whatever. I have to remember sometimes that usually, not always, but usually, this stuff is developed with teenagers in mind or young adults in mind. Not being a young adult anymore and veering into middle, very much into middle age, I can kind of just ignore it sometimes and just be like, oh good, it's another fucking school or whatever. But you also have to remember that in Japanese culture, you're in school 6 days a week. And I think you're at work 6 days a week too. Like, work is fucked up. That's a whole other thing. But the general conceit is it's an easy framing device for a lot of different stories, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Quality notwithstanding, it is fertile ground for things, especially when you consider that a lot of characters have to be, they can't be paragons of virtue. They can't be fully formed people. So when's the best time to do not fully formed people with issues? Probably high school or middle school or something of that nature. So yeah, even if it becomes cliche after a while, it's just, there's a reason why it gets done. Either to fit the demographic that the show is going for, or telling a story and, finding a way to do it. Or in some instances, and I'll go over this in a couple of the shows I'm mentioning, it's to introduce new concepts to old characters. And I think that's where recently I've seen this, and these are kind of mini reviews of these arcs in and of themselves. One of them is Ancient Magus Bride Season 2. I'm pretty sure I talked about Ancient Magus Bride way back, because that was when it debuted. It was like 2017, 2018. They brought it back a few years ago and had Chisei in high school or in college, right? And specifically a magic college. The biggest thing that the season did was it established, okay, there are people in this world. Because with Ancient Magus Bride, a lot of the stuff that seems to happen with Elias and Chisei and whatnot tends to be out of everyone's way. Just avoiding people in general. But dangerous things that happen are ethereal in nature and whatnot, based on the show itself, based on the magic, based on alchemy, based on all sorts of things. Magic and mages and all that stuff. But taking that into consideration, you already have Chisei pretty much a fully fleshed out character. Elias, a fully fleshed out character. Giving them a new setting. And mostly by Chisei's choice, because she wants to learn things. That in and of itself allows her, because even though she's fully developed into the arc of the show and what she is about, she doesn't have much interaction with people. And her backstory is such that she was kind of an outcast, if not full-on outcast. So her interactions with people, whether she had this new power or not, has not really been tapped into. So I do kind of respect that, because when you have a character who is fully established as the main character, there's only so much you can do to kind of change them. Because these arcs, and I'll talk about the Black Butler one next, you can't go against the established, like, 12, 24, 36, 48, God knows how many episodes. There's only so much you can stretch a certain character of suspension of disbelief, and I brought this concept up a lot, of suspension of disbelief. Nothing that Chisei and Elias can do can go against what they've established, because then you're like, okay, I'm not going to turn Chisei into this fun-loving, amazing, bubbly personality or a rule breaker or whatever. I can't turn Elias into a drunken party boy. It just doesn't work. So what can you do with these people in this setting? Well, you can introduce other people into the mix, and some, I think, like, they're introduced as important, and then you realize they weren't, because they were going somewhere else with it. Sometimes you have an intuition of, like, okay, this person is this, and then they turn out like they're not really all that involved in the story. The college, like, setting, I was kind of hoping for more fiddling around with magic and mages and cool stuff as a concept. There was an early part of an episode where Elias, like, transmogrifies the face and body into that of a young woman teacher, and I was just like, that's a great gag, and you only do it like 2 or 3 times, and you're just like, you pulled this thing out of your ass and you didn't do anything with it. Like, you didn't have, like, any teacher falling for it as a weird, like, oh my god, Elias is now suddenly beautiful, despite being a, like, what would you call it, cow-headed alchemist person, whatever. Basically it was that gag in the first couple of episodes where he got a human face and then they dropped it and they never did it again. Same idea here. They just was like, this is a cool idea, we're never doing it again. They never do Elias teaching classes more than that. They're so busy. Even with 20 some episodes of the season, they were very much in a hurry to introduce all of the characters and the setting and get to the Philomena part, which admittedly was important, as was a car coming by. Joy. But, talking about Philomena and then how it involves Chisei, how Philomena is and her mother, what her entire storyline is, what Lucy's story is, and why they're kind of, they do enough with those two. It's those two characters that really matter. They filter in other things like secret societies and other crazy wormhole stuff, and here's a competition between students and do the thing, and then, this teacher is suddenly a part of the whatever, but is observing them / spying on them. There's a lot of competing little things going on that I think if you were going to do a public school setting, I think they were trying to use it as a framing device rather than, this is a new lived-in setting with lived-in rules and lived-in things. I think, again, the Elias thing, teaching a class as a gag, would have been something you could have carried episodes with. Or you could even had Elias-specific episodes about, being in that form and what does it mean about, how do people interact with him? How do teachers interact with him as a new character? How would they interact with him in his normal form? They don't do that. They focus more on, Chisei, of course, but they don't focus on her enough because there's only so much you can do with this character again. And she's merely just kind of a backdropper and an observer to other people. They were trying to tell other people's stories rather than focusing on the two leads. They were just kind of there along for the ride. I can't say that that's a bad thing. And again, if I had more time to focus on it as a review, like, it's been a couple of years, give or take, since I've seen it. So my memory is a bit fuzzy. But it does seem like in the scope of a show that was very fantastical and very morose in spots, they still maintain it, but there is something lost when you have this entirely new setup and you just kind of, well, let's set up 5 or 10 other students that are Chisei's friends and then go. And then we got to get to the 2 that really matter, and then everybody else is kind of, I think they tried way too hard to have too much stuff all at once, which doesn't really fit the narrative when you have a 24 episode show and it feels like they didn't do enough with the setting. That doesn't mean that they're not going to. They had no sense that they said, like, they might bring Mega's Bride back again. It's very popular, and they might do more with the show, just in a different form. But you had a chance to either make it a little more comedic or do a little bit more without, obsessing over character details. But they were using it as a way to tell a story. Same is true for Black Butler public school arc. This one felt a little, I'm not going to say lackadaisical in its presentation, because with the Mega's Bride one, you have, here's a college full of mystical creatures doing mystical things and learning their specific skills and skill set, but also teaching other people about them, and, almost X-Men-y an approach. You can do a lot with an X-Men style school. Black Butler is just, we're Weston College. We do very hoity-toity things with hoity-toity people, but we have this evil thing that's happening, and let's figure this shit out. So that's really what Black Butler has centered on since it came back with the circus and the Atlantic and public school, and now the Emerald Witch, is several shorter arcs of 10 and 12 episodes, putting Sebastian and Ciel in these new situations, rather than keeping them in London and having them do London-y things, because they've done that in 2 other seasons. Well, 1 other season, and then 1 that was just a weird fucking non-canon thing. But whatever. Black Butler's been around for 20 years. I'm not going to question it. It's still working. But that, again, was, you can't go against type, but you also have to go, when is it time to pull back and when is it not? Sebastian doesn't really do a whole lot in the public school arc. He actually did a shit ton more in the Emerald Witch stuff than he did in the public school. His gag is being an administrator and whatever, and tidying up places. That was his involvement, or him chasing down an administrator who went rogue, or stuff like that. Like, there's only so much he can do. This is actually more of a CL focused thing, and I do like that, because there is a lot more fertile ground to talk about with CL as a young kid who's basically been given a shit hand in life. Told, hey, go to this public school of hoity-toity people and throw it into disarray to learn how things work. But then, like, their setup for the school is just Harry Potter. Like, they're fairly, like, here's 4 specific places with 4 specific color codes with 4 specific people with the names. Like, I didn't even put together that their names were the colors. I'm just dumb. Or I did, and then I'd forgotten about it until I looked it up and was like, oh, that's the extent of the creativity, I suppose. To be fair, Black Butler is more of a comedy in spots, so, they don't have to overdo it. But yeah, they went for the most basic of basic options, and it's telling a story, not much of one. The idea is CL getting into the school, trying to learn its rules. I think they could have done a lot more with the rules, honestly, but I think they were just trying to not burden us with it, because you have to do like one couple of story with a bully, couple episode story with a bully, figure out how to get into the, like, I don't know if they needed to do the cricket thing. They spent a shit ton of time talking about cricket. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. Sports arcs are another thing that I don't really care for. Like, I love sports. I don't need to see it in other TV shows. Like, I love Major League and I love Mighty Ducks, but I don't need to see endless things. I've never been an anime sports guy because I don't need to see sports in anime. So it didn't seem to me like all that important and impressive to spend 2 or 3 episodes talking about cricket and showing off cricket. I was just kind of whatever. Get me back to CL doing interesting things with that. But it served its purpose to get him, because his whole story is that he is a schemer. He is a smart, manipulative son of a bitch. And he just will use that to his advantage because he has no other alternative. And he did that. Getting to the main story arc, and this is where, like, I don't know where Black Butler is going to go in terms of what they're trying to set up, because this is feeding into Emerald Witch. They introduced one of the other characters early on as the main big bad guy. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but it's essentially taking somebody you already knew and placing them as kind of the forefront, as the main antagonist, but there's only so much that they do. They're the ever-present threat, but they're being chased down, but you don't really know what they're trying to do. And even in Emerald Witch, they don't do anything with it. They do more in the Atlantic cruise and the public school. And it's cool, but you only get like an episode or 2 with them. And when we get back to the establishing of a character and the doing the thing, it does seem kind of strange as like, when is enough? When are you going to have a little bit more like pomp and circumstance? You have this public school setting, and then you find out that it was a front all along to aid in the main bad guy's big scheme all along. It was cool, but at the same time, it didn't add enough, because it had that whole air of, oh, we're 2 episodes away from finishing, better wrap this shit up. It does feel like they were focusing too much on the public school stuff, but they also had to weigh in, we have this antagonist we're chasing, we have this storyline we have to go through. Black Butler has the issue of having too few episodes, whereas Magus Bride had too many, but they didn't do enough with it. So they're trying to pull like the opposite ends of the spectrum here. Too much but not enough, or too little and too long. It's like both issues. I would prefer, if you're going to have a lived-in setting, you're going to have it lived in and baked in as the thing. But I also can't sit here and say that the characters themselves are wrong, because you're taking established characters and putting them into the thing. It'd be one thing if, say, Black Butler was trying to do a public school arc and not focusing on CL and Sebastian and whatever, because God knows that would just be in a different show in and of itself. It would make no sense. How much time can we spend establishing a certain character in a certain setting? I think there are places where you can do more, though. Cutting out things like, oh, this is funny because they're playing cricket and they're doing gags about having other people shitting themselves out of, shitty cake or shitty food, It's funny, but it's also just kind of basic. You could have told more about, like, what is the rule set? Who are the drudges? Who are the whatever? Things like that. Because every show is different, and every show has a balance point of how much do we care about the characters being very direct with the viewer versus how much detail do we need to give to this thing. And I might be off base, but I think if you're going to add a new setting, you want a lot of time in that setting to make it and establish it and, feel like something. This is going to go away from the public school arc for a second, but to establish my point here, like Kowloon generic romance or Shadow's house as examples. I think there's always this sense that there's never enough done, but they're always feeding you something new, both about the characters lived in, because the characters are the important thing, the setting secondary, but there's still stuff to tell. There are still places to go. There are still things that you need to learn about this city of Kowloon, or the Shadow's house, or its machinations. And there always seems like, while they're trying to do the main story, they're also trying to filter in, oh, this is a new part of the house, this is a new part of the city we haven't been in, we have a different part of like, there's a mystery. As soon as a mystery of a location has been wrung dry, it's gone. So learning to reel back and be like, okay, there's still a lot more we could get out of this setting, rather than, oh, we've just established a thing, let's just go to the main ending. That's what it felt like for Black Butler. They had too many things that they were doing that weren't kind of going for the thing. And I think Magus Bride, to its benefit, might stay in the college and do more. I think with the college, you have different types of magic, different people with different skill sets. The X-Men analogy. You can focus an episode on this person, or this person, or this person, or this person, or do a gag in another episode, just being a side thing about a different part of the college, and, you know, establishing further places that you can go, rather than, we're centering on this main storyline, we're not going to move from this main storyline, let's just go. So maybe that makes sense, maybe that doesn't. I might be rambling, but again, I think there's a sweet spot somewhere where you're going to go through the trouble of establishing a new place. Do you want to do enough that it feels lived in to where it matters? The example I would throw in right now would be, say, Final Fantasy VIII or the Gardens. Like, we don't have to go to classes every single day to, you know, understand what they're doing. We get enough of the established canon to know, but they keep going back to these places as places. They are student dorms, basically. They are colleges. They are, you know, going to classes and learning things. I don't think you need to go to every single class and do every single thing, but they show, like, off and on, you're going in and out of this Balam Garden or Blam Garden thing, or you're going to a different one. You're showing similar but different things. You're showing off, oh, okay, now we're doing a boss fight in this part of the thing, but it's still technically this campus. Or we're showing off a new character, they like to do this thing in that place. You know, you're constantly kind of slowly peeling back layers, and it never felt like they were too far away from it being like a home. I never got the sense that Weston College or, you know, Chisei's College in Magus Bride ever felt like home, despite being there as a setting. There's still more you could have done, and I do think that that's one of the drawbacks of trying to take an established show and putting it somewhere else. Because you want a setting to feel commonplace, but never too common that it doesn't matter anymore. So you have to have that balancing point. Do I think other shows are going to pull this stuff? I'm sure they are. I would bet you. I don't know which ones. I mean, something like Apothecary was dabbling in the school idea, but they never really said, Mao Mao's going to school. But I could totally see something where, like, Freerin or Mao Mao go into a school. You know? Not that they have to, but just because it would be funny. Or have Fern or whatnot do it instead because she's way younger. You know? Something like that. Taking an established character and going to a school for a season. You know, that's kind of the idea. Does it make sense? Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But it's weird when you do that. Because how much is too much and how little is too little? Maybe I'm just wrong here, but it does feel like they were trying to do both and it failed. I would say Black Butler failed more so because, again, they were trying too hard to get things done very quickly. At least with Megas Bride, you do have the opportunity to do more in the college if they chose. But maybe that's just me. But I wanted to do this one as kind of a, not an episode specific idea, kind of a mini review. I will get to these reviews, in theory in more detail later, if I so choose to go back and watch them. And who knows, maybe with Megas Bride, I'll have an answer, a year or two from now and be like, oh, well, they answered my question. Because it's, sometimes I have this problem where I want something so fast, I forget to let something breathe. And then eventually something does breathe, and it's like, okay, I get it now. I'm smart. I waited. I got payoff. The Lowland thing. I got payoff. Whatever. But that'll do for today. Let's see what episode we've got here. So we did public school arc. Again, this was kind of a mishmash of different things. Legend of Dragoon is next. Oh, goody. I have a lot to talk about with Legend of Dragoon, having just finished it. Solty Rei after that. Nier Automata, both the game and the anime. One I like a lot more than the other, if you couldn't tell. And then The Illusion of Gaia. So, in between that, I'll have the summer shows and other things that I will talk about here and there. But for now, I'll call it an episode, and I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.